I'm Michelle,
And I'm Katherine,
and we're here at the Healthy Hurried Human podcast.
where we talk about keeping pace in a world that never slows down.
Well, we're excited to be back with the Healthy Hurried Human podcast.
I have to say, I'm enjoying season 2 a lot. Today, we're going to jump right in to, we're naming this one Tomorrow's Workforce, and I think we should put a question mark at the end, because what do you think of when you hear the term tomorrow's workforce?
It quickly takes me back to my recruiting days and the pipeline questions about will we have the right people in place when we land a big project, or, our predictions for 5 years out, 10 years out. That's immediately what I think of.
That's funny because that is way more cerebral than what I think of when I first got asked, hey, what do you think about tomorrow's workforce? I went to Disneyland, to Tomorrowland. And that is not what anybody is talking about when they are wanting to discuss tomorrow's workforce.
Well, I don't know. I would rather be at Disney World than I would be in a boardroom trying to figure out our talent pipelines.
Do you think that if in boardrooms, here we go again, in boardrooms and meetings and leadership, do you think people are discussing tomorrow's workforce?
Always.
In what ways do you think they're discussing it, though?
Currently or traditionally?
Both? Answer both.
Well, traditionally, healthy companies recognize that there is going to be retirement, recognize that there is going to be growth, and know that really what their commodity is, what they bring to the table, is their human capital. And are we training the right workforce? Do we have the right people in place? Is there mentorship? Is there development? Being from the HR side, do we have the right people in our company to have the growth projections that we're looking at, or to be able to fill the projects that we're bidding on? Well, that was particular for that one company, but that from my experience, whether it was when I was a retail manager, you had to have somebody who could work the store 7 days a week, and trying to keep people in there with a high turnover, because the retail market that I was in was not necessarily something that had a lot of career opportunities for people. There were really only 2 or 3 people in a store that could make a career out of being in retail.
Right.
So that is one aspect of how I think for successful people, if you want your company to be sustainable, if you want an evergreen company, if there's a longevity, if there's a legacy, then you have to actually internally develop, but also look at what externally you want to hire in.
You and I, when we were talking about this, you had brought up something where companies can get very focused on the fiscal aspect of it. Talk a little bit more about that, because I was like, that's where I think the focus goes when people think of when companies and organizations are planning or adjusting, they are thinking almost one-dimensionally.
Well,
maybe not.
If we're talking about like private sector or valuation firms, they look at a number of key indicators to value a company for stock values. And there are 5-year predictions. There's also, they look at performance, like what were your predictions for the last year? Did you meet your goals? And they look at their 5-year trajectory. There are a number of factors that go into place for evaluation. One of them that is not necessarily looked at is the talent pipeline. And what will you have the workforce that's going to be there? I think it's just assumed that the financial reflections are the temperature that need to be taken in many different things. Your KPIs,
Those are
the
all
fiscal goals. That's much more of what is being reported and recorded and presented to the board of directors. And I take that back. Most of the time, the board of directors will, depending on how close the board is and how large the company is, we'll usually have a conversation at some point in time about your talent pipeline. Oftentimes will be a presentation regarding, what do you have on the horizon already in place? But when it's coming to valuations and reportings and recordings, a lot of times, I haven't seen a sheet given about the stock value of a company and their talent pipeline.
So I think what we're kind of getting at the most is that companies can get very focused on where is this what are we going to look like in 5-10 years fiscally with numbers, but maybe there's not
acquisitions
right. But not as much of what does our human capital workforce look like, other than I think right now the conversation is AI going to be a heavy player. We're going to get into that in another episode, but is AI going to be a big player? What's going to happen with how employees are seen, how they're treated, how are we
That's more of the human resources side, or the talent economy side that is just assumed you're going to do that well, because it's imperative to growth.
But I think that's where you and I are kind of the whistle to say, I don't think we can assume, like there's too much assumption, and maybe the way we've assumed before isn't working.
That is where a large part of what happens is that the indicators begin to slip. Financially, you begin to slip. A project fails. That was a key project. And that's what causes people to stir the waters and say, we don't have the right mix here. This isn't correct. And that's usually when consultants get called in, is because something isn't working well.
That's right. Well, I want us to kind of pivot, but also kind of align something here and talk about something that you and I have enjoyed talking about, which is looking back and saying, when we look at the workforce as a whole, I love looking at the history of the workforce.
Sure.
But you had said this, that we have not had a major workforce disruption since World War II until COVID. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like, what that means when we say workforce disruption, because after World War II, we had decades upon decades. We had a couple of generations in the workforce that the workforce didn't change that much. It stayed the same. It was predictable. There was just, this is how it works. And then COVID happens, and we have this. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because both of us enjoy this. It's a little going into history and then the culture of it, what's changed.
For just a brief overview, there are obviously more experts that are better suited to have this conversation. But with World War II, there was a major disruption. There was countrywide rationing. There was loss of the labor force going overseas to fight in wars. Minorities and women were taking over roles into factories. There was a big push for
and the sciences.
The sciences. There was a big push for the American supply chain to not fail. I'm thinking of like 3 or 4 stories. My mother is a World War II buff and has passed on a lot of information, and we just talk a lot about World War II and stories there. And there are stories of the pipeline, the oil, the importance of American oil to fund the war effort, and or the importance of the people who were trained to extract oil were being shipped overseas to help in England and different places. There's high importance for the success of America running at full throttle. We could not afford to be affected by the loss of this workforce. So doing a little bit of research, all of a sudden after the war, you have all the GIs coming home, taking their jobs back. And then you had mass layoffs for women and minorities. And it took there were like 3 or 4 different main ways that, like, how long did the rations last? They still, because it wasn't immediate.
It wasn't instant, right?
And it kind of took, like, 1947, I think, is around the time that they stopped having to ration things. And then, I mean, we're talking gas rations, sugar rations. Like, there were my grandparents were married in the middle of World War II. They received gas rations as wedding presents so they could go on a honeymoon. Oh, wow. They went to a hotel and went bowling. Like, there's this hilarious story about that for another time. But they received gas rations, and they're for honeymoon gifts. So you don't even think about how it affects, like,
everyday
society and social life. So that was beginning to wean off. And then about the 1950s is when early 1950 is when they say that the workforce began to stabilize again.
Well, and that was also the housing boom.
Well, and then that started with
the economy,
the consumer boom, housing boom. Like, a lot of that just began to thrive. There was, because of the sciences, there was a big rush of a lot more scientific exploration, development.
So about 5 years but what people don't understand, we're going to get into this with COVID, is that there was that transitioning period that can be tough before, and then around 5 years, you start to see normalcy, whatever you want to define that as, happening. And that's the workforce. Decades go by, we don't have another major disruption until COVID.
Not one that affected the entire country the way that COVID did.
Right. And that's really the key. You know, people who are listening to this could throw out like, well, what about this? Or what about, the 1980s, things like that. But we're talking where it impacted nationally, but also globally. And you and I have decided, we're the experts on this in right now. We've decided that we're still in that transition period because people can't even decide when COVID was over.
That's right.
Just recently I heard, I hear people say, in 2021, in the middle of COVID, in my mind, I'm like, what? Really?
I heard
because we were in Georgia.
Someone was referring to 2022 in the middle of COVID, and that being in the state of Georgia, we opened up in May 4th of 2020.
Right.
And my family members in Virginia, we had a death in the family, and in October, my grandmother passed away, and we went to Virginia for the funeral, and they hadn't been in restaurants because Virginia was still
right.
closed.
And I was saying that in 2022 we went up north, and it was like they were just kind of waking up and just starting to. And there was still what do we call it? Like mandates in place, and in 2022 for us, coming from Georgia, we were like, what in the world?
And that is a good reason to say we're still not clear on
when are we done? When are we past it?
When were the restrictions or the mandates? Like, when did that stop? We know that the effect it had on the supply chain is still ongoing, and that has not really picked back up again. That we saw it affect housing. We saw it affect commercial real estate. There was a lot of disruption, and we could name every single industry
right.
that has not come back yet fully. And
that creates this confusion of like, so how long? Because I was asking you, when do we think we can be past the transition of coming out of COVID and think, all right, this is now the normalcy of work? And we don't have the answer to that. I'm kind of like 2030. Can we hopefully expect that? But there's so many questions still.
But what we're talking about with tomorrow's workforce is that this, thinking about the Jetsons TV show and the predictions of we're going to be in flying cars by, 2025, and guess what? We're not there yet. And but it's all the futuristic movies from the 80s and what they were predicting for us in this time period. We've always had a suspicion that robots and AI were going, well, we didn't call it AI at the time, I don't believe, that they were going to come over and take over our world. There have been numerous movies made about that. And at the same time that we were advancing AI technology, COVID hit as this massive global disruptor. And we all had to go home and we all had to, work from home. And then we now are launching AI at the same time. And for those of us that have spent time in HR trying to get the talent pipeline going, with AI being so changing all the time. We don't even know what our work, there are some incidences where we don't know what our workforce will be in 5 years. We don't know what AI can do for us in 5 years.
Well, there are some who would argue, I might be one of them, that tomorrow's workforce isn't 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. I feel like, it's based on recent events like layoffs, I feel like it's 6 months from now to a year, because AI, I feel like I've submerged myself in trying to learn AI for the past year or more. It's actually last year. I really made an intentional effort to say I'm going to learn this. And even in my mind, I thought, this is probably not going to be something I'm going to really start heavily depending on and using right now. But I am seeing that it's right now. It's coming right now. And we're going to talk about a particular company in another episode soon. But you're hearing about major companies laying off and saying, we are turning and relying heavily, we're replacing jobs with AI. So I don't know if I think when we're talking specifically about AI, that I think that's tomorrow's workforce 5 years from now. I think we're looking at it in 6 months to a year, that it's going to have, part of me wonders if we haven't talked about this, but I'm also wondering if it's going to bring another disruption.
I'm two-minded about this, because we have less babies being born. Mm. There
are some who would argue against that.
No,
I agree with you. But there are those who.
That is not. It's not. It is a sign. It is a proven fact that women at the age of 35 have fewer babies than ever before in the history of America. Mm. There are fewer children being born. Period. It is not in question. It is.
So you're two-minded in that we're going to need AI?
We have the luxury of having a lot of people take care of us and do things for us, and we are not going to be able to have people in those jobs. We don't have enough people. So there will be a disruption in, think of every single restaurant we go into, all the help wanted things, like they just don't have enough people who want to take those jobs or who are doing those jobs. And the interesting thing is, the jobs that are being replaced are more, well, at least what I've been noticing, are more thought-producing jobs, right? Or, God forbid, customer service helpline that you call into. But there are, I feel like I'm getting off track with what I'm saying, but we don't. So one of my points is that 30 years from now, we don't have the labor force we need. I think it's well established. I'm a Michael Rowe from Dirtiest Jobs and various other things. He was talking about the need for laborers to build battleships, submarines, do manual labor that cannot be done robotically. And he was being approached by different organizations saying because he has an organization called Mike Rowe Works, look it up. that is incentivizing and giving scholarships to people who are going into trade schools. And they came to him and said, we need people. And he said, the people that you need are in 8th grade, because we have not
prepared.
We have not been educating, impressing, recruiting people to go into the trade schools, to go into trade. And we need to start now. We've got a 10-year gap that we've got to work for, because we have dropped the ball on recruiting people into industries that actually have to have a human doing them. So that's another, where is tomorrow's workforce? They're in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my two mind of we don't have enough humans. We're not reproducing. I can't quote the numbers, but they are numbers out about what Korea is struggling with, because they have not been having as many babies. And but this is not just an American scenario.
Right.
So yay, that AI is getting really smart. What I think is fascinating is the jobs that they're taking over are not the ones that we
thought they were.
That's right.
Because I think in many ways we thought AI is going to take over just task-oriented jobs.
That we don't want.
Right.
We didn't expect it to be able to be such a thought center.
But it's not. But AI, I think this is the scary thing, is that AI is being put into places where there should be human decision-making and logic and ethics and leadership. Oh. And that, I think, is really something for leadership decision makers to be thinking about is, as much as I work with AI, it can't replace the human part of ethics and leadership. And I mean, the guy of ChatGPT that created ChatGPT came out 2 weeks ago saying, you need to be careful how much you trust it. I mean, he's the one who created it, saying that, we have, and so I guess that's where I look at these companies who are saying, we're going to bring in AI in this huge mass way. And yet you have creators of AI saying you got to be careful.
So there's also studies that are being done, and they have been done for a while now, that are showing the effect of human brain function when we let AI make a lot of decisions for us. Mm-hmm. So when GPS came out, which I use GPS every single day in Atlanta because mainly for traffic, not anything for trying to, not necessarily because I don't know how to get places. It is 100%, is this road under construction, and are there, how long is it going to take me to get someplace? But the taxi drivers in London were renowned for knowing the city like the back of their hand, having their own routes, getting places quickly. And when they introduced GPS, after a number of months, they stopped using them, and they were saying it makes us dumber. Like there's a part of our brain that doesn't have to problem solve anymore, that is making us just, it starts slowing down and affecting other parts of your brain. You're not, there's an important part of our brain that needs to chase that carrot.
That's right.
The critical
part. Mm-hmm.
It is vital for brain health. Mm-hmm. And we are giving over more and more. They were talking about ChatGPT with the thought producers, like generating writing things for us. And we're relying on AI instead of training our brains how to think better, write better, and do better.
So we had started with, or we had wanted to start with, why is this important? And for me, it's important, especially at the leadership, the management level, for this to be a discussion. I don't know that you and I have created any real, hey, here's I think we've shown the pain point, but what do you do with it? How do you do it? for me, I think it's important. I want people to be talking about it. What does this look like? What does this mean? Because if you're in leadership, if you're in management, these are heavy things, especially for the employee the everyday employee who's coming in and hearing the same news that we're all hearing, that big ABC company has done mass layoffs because they're turning to AI, or they're restructuring their workforce. You're creating you're creating mistrust. You're creating an instability in your workforce without even it being on you.
Well, one of the questions you raised is what should leaders be asking themselves about ethics? Where ethically in our company do you want a human? Like, it's been proven with the military that there is intuition and judgment that comes, that AI sees things as black and white, and it's obviously they're working on it being more nuanced. But where in your company, let's just look at every job. Take the time to look at every role in your company and say, what could be replaced with AI, and what do we stand firm on that cannot be replaced?
I love
what
that.
has to have a human component. And that needs to be a conversation now.
It does.
Of what, and make that decision and set that precedent. And then, have that conversation about key factors of what would be lost with the human element.
This makes me think of, you and I have talked in previous episodes about the importance of succession planning. And to me, this needs to be bullet point 1, 2, or 3 when you sit down to talk about what do we value when it comes to succession planning and how are we going to do that. I would say this episode I hope it's motivational. I hope it creates, we haven't really solved anything per se. We're not even sure if we could decide on, is it the workforce of tomorrow 6 months from now, or is it 5 years from now?
It's both.
Yeah, I do believe that it's both. There's aspects of it that are strongly both, but I want people to sit down, and especially at the leadership table, to say, we have to make this a conversation, and it has to be a conversation often and frequently, in that we keep questioning the importance of, like you said, where's the ethics? Where are our values as an organization, and how are we going to stay aligned to that as we grow, as we change, as we shift in the workforce?
What's the human component that would be lost if we were to go to AI? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I had ChatGPT write we were doing in October a breast cancer awareness initiative, and I had ChatGPT help me write it, and it was great, and it pulled in a lot of things. But I always go back and have to tweak things and personalize it and make it more specific to who our people are. And that's something that human value makes, a human connection. You just don't get that from AI. You just don't get that. The human connection. I don't care how great your robot is.
Well, Grant gave me a closing remark option here, and I like it. It says, we can't slow the future down, but we can show up for it emotionally ready, relationally clear, and mentally flexible. That's the new gold standard, and it's the only way that we're going to thrive in our workplaces. We didn't dive deep into all of that, but as we're looking and planning in leadership for a futuristic workforce, all of our key functional indicators play into it, but several that the 3 that are at the top are the positive self-growth. Are we building that into our workforce? Are we helping people understand healthy inner circle? Are we creating that for them? Because workers are more connected than they've ever been, because we can get on Zoom calls and Teams meetings, but they're also reporting that they're the most lonely at work than they've ever been. And so that speaks to the emotional and relational aspect. And then empowering questions, being willing to ask the hard questions that aren't necessarily for getting a solution and solving it, but are creating clarity for how we're going to build and how are we going to adjust. So I'm going to leave it there.
Great.
And hope that this has been
Read that quote from Grant one more time.
We can't slow the future down, but we can show up for it emotionally ready, relationally clear, and mentally flexible. That's the new gold standard, and it's the only way we thrive in the workforce.
Emotionally clear. The three things.
Emotionally ready, relationally clear,
okay,
and mentally flexible. I think I like that one. That one fits for me. I'm gravitating towards that mentally flexible because middle age you get
well, change is coming. Changes here.
It changes here. We look forward to the next episode of The Healthy Hurried Human.
Yeah, thanks for being with us.
The Healthy Hurried Human podcast is presented by Foxygen Consulting. At Foxygen, we provide business and performance psychology and consulting. We believe healthier people make a healthier workplace. Foxygen Consulting, breathing new life into your organization.